logical properties. For instance, stealing is bad is inconsistent with stealing is not bad. Murder is bad is entailed by stealing is bad and murder is bad. And you can form valid arguments out of moral language too. For instance, if stealing is bad, then murder is bad, stealing is bad, therefore murder is bad. If you analyse moral language in terms of what makes it true or false, then you can explain this. Take stealing is bad. If that is true, then stealing is not bad cannot also be true. If stealing is bad and murder is bad is true, then murder is bad must be true. Truth conditional semantics can explain the logical properties of moral language. But the non-cognitivists rejected truth conditional meaning. They thought that moral language shouldn't be explained in terms of what makes it true, so they can't explain this. Take air as an example. Remember, he thought that moral language expressed emotions, so stealing is bad is like stealing, boo. What happens if we put that into a conditional? If stealing is bad, then murder is bad. What the heck does that mean, according to Ayer? This is a big problem because any theory of language needs to explain the compositionality constraint. We can think of infinite different sentences, some of which have never been said before, but we can always try and figure out what they mean because the meaning of a big sentence follows from the meaning of its smaller parts. If I know what cat, sat on and mat mean, I know what the cat sat on the mat means. But Ayer cannot do that because the meaning of this, whatever it is according to him, cannot follow from the meaning of this. And I'm just using Ayer as an example here. None of the non-cognitivists managed to do this. And this is just the beginning. Watch this. If stealing is bad, then murder is bad. Stealing is bad, therefore murder is bad. This argument is valid. If the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. But watch what happens when we translate premise 2 to a non-cognitivist paraphrase. The argument doesn't look valid anymore, because when we say stealing is bad as premise 2, we're saying something different from when we say stealing is bad as part of premise 1. We've equivocated on the meaning of one of our key terms, so the conclusion doesn't follow. And this is the central problem with non-cognitivism. It cannot take a simple moral sentence, embed it in a complex one, and explain how the meaning of the complex follows from the meaning of the simple. And all the while, the truth conditional semanticist is grinning like a Cheshire cat because that is the one thing they can do very well. And that is the Frege-Geach problem, one of the most famous and important bits of ethics ever. Non-cognitivism was pretty much destroyed by this. It did come back later in another form called expressivism, but that's another story for another time. This is, I think, the hardest script I've ever written, so if you're a little bit lost, don't worry. The next full-length episode will be on the 9th of January. We could either do What is Imagination, or we could do Descartes' argument for the existence of God. Next week there's going to be something a little bit different. It's new, I hope you like it. Still educational and intellectual, but with a bit of a different flavour to it. I'm quite excited. All will be revealed and explained next week, so be sure to check back and find out what that is. And if you haven't already subscribed to PhilosophyTube, then you should probably go ahead and do that. This episode was sponsored by some of the fans, Rich Clark, DJ, and a bunch of other people whose names are in the description, so if you'd like to sponsor the show, you can find me on Patreon. Last time we were talking about Schopenhauer and art, so let's see what you guys had to say. First and foremost, Artem Kaznachiv and Sticky Drozira let me know some bits of Schopenhauer that I glossed over, and some bits that I actually got wrong, especially with the pessimism thing, so thank you to both of you guys for pointing that out. I'm sorry that I made those mistakes. It is always embarrassing. I mean, I am going to make mistakes on the show. Those sorts of things do happen. What I told you guys was a faithful translation of what I was taught about Schopenhauer, but obviously it contains some errors. But it's really cool that there are people who watch the show who not only know that and can point it out, but who do it in a nice, constructive way. So thank you to both of you for pointing out those mistakes. I'm sorry that I made them, and if you want to know the bits of Schopenhauer that I glossed over, particularly in my criticisms of him, you can go back and read those comments. Jake Holman asks, assuming video games are art, where would they fit into Schopenhauer's aesthetics? I don't see why a video game couldn't embody one of the ideas, these transcendent objects that Schopenhauer thought art should embody, although maybe if you lose your individuality partially or wholly when watching it, then it might make it difficult to play, so maybe you could have a particularly beautiful cutscene, or maybe one of those sliding sequences in Journey would do the trick, actually. Minute Poetry and Max Schneider pointed out that different people enjoy different works of art, but if the art is supposed to embody the ideas, which Schopenhauer thought it did, and looking at the ideas reduces suffering, then surely everybody should enjoy the same works of art. I'm not really sure what he would say to that. Maybe he would say that different people are imperfect embodiments of the will in different ways, so maybe people gravitate towards works of art that contain the ideas they most lack in themselves. Or maybe he could point to certain works of art and say that they are universally appreciated. For instance, not everyone enjoys Shakespeare, but everybody who actually looks at it can tell it's certainly very technically good. And Michelangelo's David and the Sistine Chapel, not everyone enjoys them, but we can all appreciate that they are very impressive works of art. Christina Gare brought up an interesting problem. If artists are supposed to create art that embodies the ideas, and you can only experience the ideas by looking at art, then how do they ever experience the ideas in order to get them into their art? Obviously the problem that you're brushing up against there is one of infinite regress. I'm not sure whether Schopenhauer says that art is the only way we can experience the ideas. Maybe artists could experience them some other way and then embody them in their art, but yeah, very interesting problem. Hello again, it's me, who studies art history, pointed out that since Schopenhauer's time there's been quite a few developments in the fields of film and photography which can capture the natural world in a very, very accurate way. So art doesn't have to try and mimic the natural world and the ideas there anymore, it can go off and be more abstract. I'm not really sure what Schopenhauer would therefore say about modern art. He could say that it's just not art, which would seem to be a little bit short-sighted of him, or maybe he could say that although art isn't capturing ideas that are in the natural world, say in a landscape anymore, it's capturing more abstract ideas like love or rage or protest, or maybe something about the art world itself, like in Duchamp's famous fountain case. I'm not really sure what angle he would go for there. He'd be a very interesting person to go around the Museum of Modern Art with. That's all the time we've got this week. Be sure to come back next week to find out what the new exciting thing is. If you celebrate Christmas, have a very, very Merry Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a lovely December, January, New Year period. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Bye! The important thing to take away from this is that the non-cognitivists thought that moral language... I don't know my lines. Specifically, it is a problem with the entire bollocks